Welcome to another deep dive. And today we are tackling a question I feel like everyone's thought about at some point. Is it better to love or be loved? We got some pretty intense debate speeches from a Japanese competition on this very topic sent in by you, the listeners.
It's fascinating how this debate really picks apart something we often think of as just simple, pure, like love. I think by putting these two sides against each other, it reveals all these complexities and anxieties that come with, giving and receiving affection.
Yeah, for sure. And they really get into it right away.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister arguing for Team Be Loved, they set the stage by defining the terms. So loving equals that act of giving care and affection, being loved as receiving it. Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
But their argument gets pretty interesting when they connect being loved directly to having emotional security.
Right.
They argue that, when you know you're loved, it creates a sense of safety, stability, and that those things are essential for being happy.
It does make you think about how much energy we spend, worrying about, our feelings reciprocated. Am I doing enough to keep this relationship going? And the Prime Minister is arguing that being loved kind of lifts that weight so you can go through life a little more confidently and peacefully.
And they use a powerful example to illustrate that.
Yeah.
Unrequited love. Ugh. That feeling, right? Pouring your heart out and the other person just doesn't feel the same. It's awful. And the Prime Minister's point is that, being loved kind of acts as a shield against that pain.
Yeah.
It's like this haven where you're safe and can grow without that fear of rejection.
But the leader of the opposition, they're not really buying it. They rebut, saying being loved isn't always sunshine and roses. Think about it. Someone is showering you with affection, but you just don't feel it back. Instead of security, you might feel trapped or obligated, maybe even resentful, right? Not exactly the bliss the Prime Minister is describing.
Yeah, it's like when you get a gift you don't really want, but you feel like you have to act all grateful. Except we're talking about, emotional burdens instead of a bad present.
Exactly. The leader of the opposition makes a good case for the other side. True happiness actually comes from loving others. They argued that when we love, we tap into this deep well of fulfillment, purpose, motivation, and all those meaningful bonds we make, family, friendships, romantic stuff, that's all fueled by us loving.
It's that feeling of connection, right?
Yeah.
Being part of something bigger than just ourselves. And then they paint a pretty, stark picture of a world focused only on being loved, a world that breeds selfishness and loneliness because everyone wants that affection, but no one's really giving it freely.
Their point is that without that active giving love, relationships become transactional. You lose that back and forth that's so important for a real connection. It's a bit of a scary thought. Everyone desperately seeking love, but unable to actually form those deep bonds, right? Because they're too focused on themselves.
So we've got these two contrasting ideas. Be loved, focusing on that emotional security. Love others, more about fulfillment and connection. Where do we go from here?
Well, the member of government steps up to defend be loved, and they acknowledge that love can be messy. Unrequited love that hurts. Even when feelings are mutual, there's jealousy, insecurity, all that turmoil. They're saying love doesn't always mean happiness, and circling back to their main point.
Which is?
The security of being loved creates a vital foundation for happiness.
Okay.
That feeling of being valued just for who you are, regardless of flaws or failures. That unwavering acceptance.
It's like having that bedrock of support, knowing there are people there for you no matter what. That unconditional love, right? It makes you face the world more confidently because you're not alone.
Yeah. And this leads them to a really interesting point. Being loved fuels personal growth. When someone believes in you, encourages you, celebrates those achievements, you unlock new levels of confidence and motivation.
So it's not just feeling good right now, but that love actually pushing you to become a better you. They're saying being loved can help us reach our potential because it builds self-worth and belief in ourselves.
Exactly. The member of government argues that this kind of creates a positive feedback loop. A community filled with people who feel genuinely loved, they say, is going to be more kind, compassionate, and supportive overall.
Okay, so this warm and fuzzy vision of a society built on love and support. I have a feeling the Love Others team won't let that go unchallenged.
You're right. A member of the opposition jumps in and immediately challenges that idea that being loved equals true security. They're saying relying on external validation for safety makes you super vulnerable. What happens, they ask, when that love goes away? You're lost, insecure, with no inner compass.
Yeah, it's like building a house on sand. Might look good for a bit, but the first storm and it all collapses. They're suggesting that true security has to come from inside. not from other people's affection.
Right. And they apply that same logic to personal growth from being loved, saying constantly seeking that validation from others can stunt your growth, makes you passive, relying on approval instead of developing your own drive.
It's like they're advocating for self-reliance, not waiting for permission to grow, but finding that motivation within yourself.
Exactly. And it all connects back to their point about loving others being fulfilling. When you actively love and care for someone, you're not just sitting back and receiving. You're in this dynamic process of giving, supporting, strengthening that bond.
So it's this proactive view of love, not waiting to be loved, but choosing to love and contribute to the well-being of others. I mean, this is the core of being a good friend, partner, family member, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being there for people even when it's tough.
And this leads to a whole new point in the debate. Another layer of complexity to this whole thing. Emotional strength. They say that the act of loving, even when it's hard, builds resilience.
So going through those ups and downs, the challenges, even the heartbreaks, it actually makes you stronger in the long run. I'm really interested to hear where they go with this.
They argue that love teaches us patience, kindness, the ability to keep going when things get tough. It forces us to face those difficult emotions, disagreements, navigate all those ups and downs of relationships without losing sight of the connection.
So it's like a workout for your heart, building up those emotional muscles so you can handle whatever life throws at you.
Exactly. And they contrast this to the fragility that can come from just focusing on being loved. They say that when your self-worth depends entirely on others, you're way more susceptible to heartbreak and disappointment. Less equipped to handle the tough times because your security is built on something that can change at any moment.
It's this contrast between fragility versus resilience, and which one develops depends on whether you're prioritizing being loved or loving others. Really adds a whole new dimension to this debate.
It does, and the member of opposition takes this even further, painting a bleak picture of a society just focused on being loved.
Let's hear it.
They argue that it creates this culture of passive, insecure people who are so afraid of losing love that they don't take risks or challenge themselves.
Mm-hmm.
A society where personal growth gets stifled and people care more about keeping things the same than reaching their potential.
Like everyone's walking on eggshells, constantly afraid of upsetting someone, of losing that love and approval. Not exactly a recipe for a thriving, innovative society.
No, not really. And that brings us to the end of the main arguments from both sides. Quite a journey so far, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. We went from defining love to exploring the psychological impacts, the societal impacts. I'm hooked. What happens next?
Well, get ready, because both leaders are about to give their final rebuttals, summing up their points and trying to, convince those judges one last time.
The final showdown. I can't wait to see who wins. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're getting down to the wire here. Final rebuttals. It's all about whether receiving or giving love is the key to a better life, right? So let's hear how the leader of the opposition wraps up their argument.
They get straight to the point, saying the government's focus on being loved makes you rely too much on others, creates this dangerous dependency. True security and growth, they say, have to come from inside you, not from needing validation from outside.
Interesting. They're not denying that being loved feels good, that comfort and reassurance, but it's like they're saying it's not a strong enough base for building a life that truly matters.
Yeah.
Like what happens when that love goes away? Suddenly you're lost, no strength to handle the tough stuff because it all came from someone else.
They really hammer home that depending only on being loved for your happiness, for your sense of self, that's setting yourself up for disappointment. Makes you vulnerable to however other people are feeling, constantly seeking their approval instead of developing your own, internal guide.
So self-reliance, inner strength, those are the keys, they're saying. What were some of the specific points their team brought up?
They do a good job of tying it all together. First, that actively loving others, not just passively being loved, is the real source of happiness. It's those actions, giving, caring, supporting. That's how we make deep connections, feel like our lives have purpose beyond just ourselves.
Yeah, makes you think about those times you've gone out of your way to help a friend or put your heart into a project that helps others. There's a different kind of satisfaction in that, right? Like you're part of something bigger.
Totally. And the leader of opposition connects that right back to their argument about resilience. The Love Others team kept talking about the emotional strength that comes from dealing with all the, messiness of love.
Yeah.
How to handle disagreements, letdowns, even heartbreak without it crushing your sense of worth.
So you face those things head on, learn from them, and you actually come out the other side stronger. and make a pretty good case for active love being like a training ground for personal growth.
And they don't shy away from the downsides of the be-loved approach. They bring back that picture of a society full of passive, insecure people, so scared of losing love that they never take chances or push themselves.
It's kind of dystopian, isn't it? Stuck in this loop of wanting validation, but never really connecting with themselves or anyone else on a deeper level.
Right. And they leave the judges with that image,
Yeah.
to think about the consequences of putting being loved above everything else.
Okay, Prime Minister's turn now to swing things back their way. How do they counter that?
They step up and admit, some of what the opposition's saying makes sense.
Yeah.
They start by reminding everyone that love always has some risk. Heartbreak, rejection, disappointment, it's part of the deal. And yeah, those things can leave you feeling hurt and vulnerable.
So they're not pretending love is all sunshine and rainbows. They're going to try and turn this around, right? To support being loved. Let's see how they do it.
They go from that potential for pain to talking about how profoundly comforting and safe it feels to be loved, reminding the judges of their team's main points. Being loved creates stability, makes you more confident, and ultimately leads to a more positive life.
It's that feeling of being totally accepted, flaws and all, right? Mm-hmm. Having a place where you can just be yourself without worrying about judgment. In a world that can feel so crazy, that kind of love can be a real anchor.
Yeah, and they directly address that dependence argument from the opposition. They say that putting being loved first doesn't mean you're weak or passive.
Okay.
Actually, they argue that the confidence and self-worth that come from being loved can give you fuel for personal growth.
It's kind of like flipping the script. Being loved isn't holding you back. It's giving you that courage to step out of your comfort zone and go for your goals because you've got that backup, right?
Exactly. When you feel secure in that love, you're less likely to get paralyzed by fear of messing up or getting rejected. You're free to experiment, try new things, and end up becoming a more well-rounded, accomplished person.
So being loved is like a launching pad for growth, not a crutch. What about that point the opposition made about actively loving, being more fulfilling? How do they handle that?
The Prime Minister agrees that loving others can definitely bring joy and purpose. But they warn against focusing so much on giving that you forget to take care of yourself.
Makes me think of that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you're always giving without taking care of your own needs, you're going to burn out, get resentful. It's finding that balance, right, between giving and getting, nurturing both yourself and those important relationships.
Exactly. And that leads them to their final point, a big reminder of how beneficial it is for society when being loved is a priority. They paint this picture of a compassionate, supportive community where everyone feels valued and has that power to reach their full potential.
So they're bringing it back to that big picture, a more harmonious, fulfilling society where love helps everyone thrive. Pretty compelling, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And with that, they leave the judges to weigh everything they've heard and decide which path really leads to a better life. The security and growth of being loved, or the fulfillment and resilience of loving others.
All right, the arguments are in. We just got to wait for the verdict. But before we reveal the winner, what are your thoughts? Anything standing out to you? Are you leaning one way or the other? Okay, for the moment of truth, judges have made their decision. Drum roll, please. And the winner of this love showdown is?
The opposition.
Wow, I was holding my breath there.
Yeah.
Both sides were so good. So what made the judges go for Team Love Others in the end?
I think they were really impressed by how the opposition kept focusing on how empowering it is to love others actively. They acknowledged, the government's points about being loved, that comfort, security, it's all real. But ultimately, they felt the opposition showed the dangers of making being loved the most important thing.
So it's not that the good stuff about being loved is wrong, but maybe relying too much on that validation from others has its downsides.
Exactly. They specifically mentioned the member of opposition's points about resilience and personal growth, said those were really strong. The Prime Minister's rebuttal, even though it was well done, didn't quite answer those concerns about, becoming fragile, dependent, if your whole sense of self comes from whether others love you.
It really makes you think, right? We tend to see love as just this good thing, brings happiness, comfort. But this debate got into the nitty-gritty. Love can lift you up or hold you back depending on how you approach it.
It makes you wonder, do we get so caught up in wanting to be loved that we forget how powerful it is to love someone else? Like maybe by always trying to be on the receiving end, we miss out on developing empathy, compassion, resilience. Those things come from caring for other people.
And it wasn't just their arguments. The judges also picked the member of opposition as best speaker. What made them stand out?
The judges loved their rebuttals, how they shut down the government's claims with such clear, logical arguments, especially how they highlighted the risks of needing that constant approval from others.
Sounds like they dominated. Any feedback for them, though?
Oh, yeah, they said they could have used more points of information. You ever notice how in some debates, people interrupt each other with these quick questions, little challenges?
Yeah, those rapid-fire things really shakes things up.
Right.
Keeps everyone on their toes. Got to think fast.
Exactly, that's points of information. The judges said the member of opposition could use that tactic more to, like, mess up the government's rhythm, force them to answer some questions directly.
Kind of like a strategic move in a game, right? Those well-timed interruptions to get the upper hand.
Great analogy. And the judges had some thoughts on the prime minister, too.
Oh, interesting, because they did a good job against some tough opponents.
Yeah, the judges said their summary of the debate was very clear, well-organized. They hit all the main points. And they liked how they tried to reframe things, arguing that being loved leads to a better life overall.
So clarity, good strategy. What was the critique?
They felt the prime minister could have done more to counter those arguments about emotional strength from loving others, like maybe using stronger examples, stories, to really paint that picture of how being loved can lead to resilience and growth.
It's subtle but important, right? It's not that the ideas were bad, but they could have been way more impactful with some vivid examples, things that would resonate with the judges.
Absolutely. So, bottom line, the judges liked how both sides used logic, but in the end, it was the opposition's emphasis on how empowering and fulfilling it is to actively love others that won them over.
Man, what a debate. It really made me think about my own ideas about love, how I balance giving and receiving in my own relationships. It's so easy to get caught up in wanting to be loved that we forget how much we can impact our own lives and other people's lives when we choose to love actively without holding back.
Powerful stuff, right? Love isn't just something that happens to us, it's a choice, something we build and grow. And by choosing to love, we make our own lives better and help make the world a more compassionate, supportive place where everyone can thrive.
What a great way to wrap up this deep dive. Huge thanks to you, our awesome listeners, for sending in these amazing debate speeches.
Right.
We covered so much today. The psychology of love, how our choices impact society, the whole shebang. Hopefully this sparked some new ideas and maybe even inspired you to think about love in a new way, with more intention.
And if this deep dive has got you thinking about your own approach to love, let us know. Leave a comment. We'd love to keep this conversation going.
Until next time, happy diving.